made lurid and false claims about the royal family, which played on her fears and fueled paranoia.
The confirmation came without drama, but its impact was immediate. When Prince William spoke, the nation felt it, not because of what he said loudly, but because of what he said carefully. His words carried weight, restraint, and a finality that left little room for misunderstanding. This was not speculation. It was not palace rumor. It was confirmation. For years, Meghan's place in the wider royal story has remained uncertain, shaped by distance, silence, and unanswered questions. But what was acknowledged today closed a chapter many believed would remain unresolved forever. The tragedy of the moment was not rooted in blame or conflict. It was rooted in acceptance, a recognition that some paths once separated do not quietly reunite. Prince William's tone reflected that reality, respectful, composed, and unmistakably firm. Across the UK, reaction was swift. Conversations paused. Headlines changed. Social feeds flooded with disbelief. Not because the outcome was shocking in theory, but because it was finally spoken aloud behind the palace walls. This moment had been anticipated. Outside them, it landed like a sudden weight, and as the words settled, one truth became impossible to ignore. Meghan's future, as confirmed, will no longer be shaped by the monarchy, and that reality carries consequences no one can pretend away. Prince William understood the gravity of what he was confirming long before the words left his mouth. This was not an emotional response, nor was it an impulsive statement. It was the result of prolonged consideration, careful discussion, and a clear understanding that ambiguity could no longer serve anyone involved within palace circles. The direction had been acknowledged quietly. Conversations over the past months had shifted tone from possibility to clarity. What remained was deciding when and how the truth would be addressed publicly. That responsibility ultimately fell to William. He did not approach the moment as a brother-in-law, or as a symbol of personal opinion. He approached it as a future monarch safeguarding stability. His language was deliberate, measured, and intentionally restrained. There was no attempt to dramatize the confirmation. Yet the absence of emotion made it more powerful that the tragic nature of the news lay in its permanence. Meghan's future was no longer tied to royal duty, royal structure, or royal expectation. This was not framed as exclusion or punishment. It was framed as reality, a reality shaped by years of separation, differing priorities, and irreversible choices. Behind the scenes, aides recognized the significance immediately. This confirmation marked the end of uncertainty that had lingered since Meghan's departure from royal life. While silence had once allowed speculation to thrive, clarity now replaced it, even if that clarity was painful. Prince William's role in delivering the message was symbolic. It signaled a generational shift in how the monarchy handles difficult truths. Rather than avoiding uncomfortable conversations, the institution chose acknowledgement over denial. This decision was not made lightly. William was acutely aware of the emotional weight attached to Meghan's name, not only for the public, but within his own family. Yet, he also understood that leadership sometimes requires distance, not out of cruelty, but necessity. Public reaction reflected division. Some expressed sadness, others acceptance. Many felt both at once. But inside the palace, the response was unified. The confirmation was seen as overdue, not to erase the past, but to define the future. What made this moment especially difficult was its tone. There was no anger in William's words. No bitterness. Only resolve. That resolve carried its own kind of sorrow, the acknowledgement that reconciliation, at least in a formal sense, was no longer expected. The confirmation also reinforced a broader message about the monarchy's direction. The institution is narrowing its focus, prioritizing clarity, structure, and defined roles. In that framework, Meghan's future no longer aligned. William remained composed throughout. Observers noted his calm demeanor, but those who know him well recognized the emotional restraint required. This was not indifference. It was discipline. Behind the scenes, family dynamics adjusted quietly. No public statements followed. No counter-narratives emerged. The palace allowed the confirmation to stand on its own, trusting that silence would speak louder than repetition. This moment did not rewrite history. It acknowledged it and then drew a line forward. For the UK, the shock came not from drama, but from certainty. And once certainty arrives, There is no returning to uncertainty again. After Prince William's confirmation, the palace did not rush to explain or soften the message. That silence was intentional. Within royal tradition, clarity is not followed by reassurance. It is followed by space. And in that space, the reality of Meghan's future became unmistakable. This moment was not about where Meghan stood physically, but where she stood symbolically. For years, her position had existed in a gray area, neither fully connected nor formally detached. That ambiguity allowed narratives to evolve, hopes to linger, and speculation to thrive. The confirmation removed that uncertainty entirely. Inside the palace, aides acknowledged what had long been understood privately. Meghan's role, once expected to grow within the institution, had already ended in practice. What changed now was that the separation was no longer implied. It was recognized. This recognition carried emotional weight. Not because of resentment, but because of closure. Closure, especially when delayed, often arrives with grief rather than relief. Those close to the situation understood that this was not a victory for anyone involved. It was an acceptance of paths that had permanently diverged. Meghan's future, as outlined by the confirmation, would move forward independently, without royal structure, without ceremonial responsibility, and without institutional expectation. That independence was not new, but the finality attached to it was. Within the palace, reactions were restrained. There was no celebration, no sense of triumph. Instead, there was an understanding that a chapter of uncertainty had ended, and with it, a period of quiet emotional strain. Staff members who had worked during the years of tension recognized how deeply unresolved questions had affected morale and focus. Prince William's role in delivering the confirmation continued to resonate. It signaled a shift toward defined boundaries, a principle increasingly central to the monarchy's future. The institution, facing modern pressures and limited resources, is narrowing its scope. Roles are being clarified, not expanded. This narrowing was not personal. It was structural. For Meghan, this meant that her name would no longer be attached to future royal planning. Invitations, expectations, and symbolic gestures that once existed in theory would no longer be considered. The monarchy was not closing doors out of hostility, but out of necessity. Observers within royal circles noted how carefully the confirmation was framed. There were no criticisms, no references to past conflict, no revisiting of grievances. That restraint was deliberate. The monarchy sought resolution, not escalation. Emotionally, this moment carried significance for the wider family as well. While public focus often centers on titles and appearances, the reality is far more human. Relationships evolve, distance grows, and eventually, acceptance replaces hope. The confirmation also reshaped public understanding. For many in the UK, this was the moment when lingering questions were finally answered. It did not validate one narrative over another. It simply defined the present. Meghan's future, now clearly separate, will unfold without royal framing. Her actions, choices, and public presence will stand on their own, not as reflections of the monarchy, but as expressions of her individual path. That independence, while empowering, also carries the weight of separation from an institution that once shaped her identity in the public eye. Inside the palace, there was a quiet acknowledgement that this clarity, though painful, was necessary. The monarchy cannot operate indefinitely in uncertainty. Defined roles protect not only the institution, but the people within it. Prince William's confirmation marked a turning point not because it ended conversation, but because it ended expectation. And expectation, when left unresolved, often causes the deepest tension of all. As the palace adjusted internally, the tone remained calm. There were no follow-up statements, no attempts to manage reaction. The confirmation was allowed to stand alone, firm, respectful, and final. For Meghan, the future now moves forward without royal ambiguity. For the monarchy, the path ahead feels more defined. And for the nation, the shock has begun to settle into understanding. Prince William did not step into this moment seeking authority. Authority found him through necessity. The confirmation he delivered was not just about Meghan's future. It quietly redefined how the nation now views him. Not as a prince preparing in the distance, but as a leader already carrying the weight of the crown. For years, William has been careful, even cautious, in his public role. He avoided statements that could inflame division and chose silence over speculation. This moment marked a clear shift. Silence was no longer serving stability. Leadership required clarity. Those inside the palace understood immediately what this meant. William was no longer shielding himself behind tradition or hierarchy. He was stepping forward, not dramatically, but decisively. His words carried consequence, and that is the defining trait of leadership. The emotional cost of this shift was visible to those closest to him. William is not detached from family complexity. He is deeply aware of the human consequences behind institutional decisions. Yet he also understands that the monarchy cannot afford to operate on unresolved emotion alone. Balance, not avoidance, is now his priority. This confirmation demonstrated a different kind of strength. Not forceful, not confrontational, but firm. It showed a willingness to accept discomfort in order to protect long-term stability. In doing so, William sent a message both internally and externally. The future of the monarchy will be built on clarity, not compromise. Senior aides noted how this moment changed internal dynamics. Discussions increasingly began to include William's perspective, not as consultation, but as direction. His judgment was trusted. His restraint was valued. His understanding of modern public expectation was recognized as essential. The public response reflected this shift. While reactions to the confirmation itself were mixed, there was growing recognition of William's composure. Many saw this as evidence that he is prepared for the complexity of kingship, not just ceremonial duties, but difficult decisions that carry emotional consequences. Catherine's influence during this time was subtle but significant. She remained out of focus, allowing William to stand alone in the moment. That quiet support reinforced the image of stability, not as performance but as partnership. Together, they projected continuity without spectacle. Within the palace, this moment also clarified generational transition. While King Charles remains firmly in place, the institution is already leaning toward the future. William's involvement in defining boundaries signaled readiness, not impatience, but preparedness. What made this moment particularly impactful was William's refusal to personalize it. He did not frame the confirmation around conflict or emotion. He framed it around reality. That restraint protected the dignity of everyone involved while reinforcing institutional authority. Historians observing the monarchy recognize moments like this as turning points, not because they are dramatic, but because they reveal how power is exercised. William's approach reflected a modern understanding of leadership, one that values transparency over tradition when tradition becomes obstructive. Internally, this clarity brought relief. Uncertainty is corrosive to institutions. By addressing what many already understood privately, William reduced internal tension and allowed focus to return to purpose rather than speculation. Emotionally, the weight remains. Leadership does not eliminate feeling, it contains it. William's composure should not be mistaken for indifference. Those who know him understand the personal restraint required to carry this responsibility without letting it fracture relationships further. As the palace moves forward, this moment will be remembered not for its content alone, but for its tone, calm, firm, respectful. Final. It marked the point where Prince William stopped being viewed as the future and began being treated as the present. And once that transition begins, it cannot be reversed. With the confirmation now settled into public consciousness, the monarchy entered a phase of reflection rather than reaction. There were no further explanations, no attempts to soften the reality that had been acknowledged. The institution chose composure over commentary, trusting that clarity, once delivered, did not need repetition. This moment reshaped public trust in subtle but significant ways. For years, uncertainty had created distance between the monarchy and the public. Speculation filled the gaps left by silence, often distorting understanding. By choosing acknowledgement over avoidance, the institution demonstrated a willingness to confront reality, even when that reality carried emotional cost. The impact of this shift extends beyond Meghan's future. It reflects a broader transformation in how the monarchy defines itself in a modern context. Boundaries are no longer viewed as cold or exclusionary. They are understood as necessary for survival. Without defined roles, the institution risks losing coherence, and with it, relevance. Internally, this clarity has allowed focus to return to purpose. Palace operations, long affected by unresolved narratives, now move forward with renewed structure. While emotion remains present, it no longer dictates direction. Stability has reclaimed its place as the guiding principle. King Charles, though less visible in this moment, remains central to its meaning. His willingness to allow this confirmation to stand without interference signaled trust in the future leadership taking shape. It reflected acceptance, not of loss, but of evolution. Reigns, like institutions, must adapt or risk stagnation. For Prince William, the implications are profound. This moment has anchored his leadership identity in reality rather than expectation. The public no longer sees preparation alone, they see execution. That shift strengthens confidence in the monarchy's continuity, not because it promises perfection, but because it demonstrates responsibility. Catherine's role remains one of quiet reinforcement. Her absence from direct involvement was intentional. By allowing the focus to remain on institutional clarity rather than personal narrative, she contributed to the tone of dignity that defined the entire moment. Stability, in this context, is as much about restraint as presence. Public sentiment continues to evolve. While some mourn the emotional weight of separation, others recognize the necessity of resolution. Both reactions can coexist. The monarchy does not require universal approval, it requires legitimacy. And legitimacy is built through consistency, not appeasement. This confirmation has also reframed historical understanding. Rather than being remembered as a period of unresolved conflict, this era will be seen as one where boundaries were finally acknowledged. That acknowledgement does not erase pain, but it allows progress. International observers have taken note. In an age where institutions often resist transparency, the monarchy's willingness to define its limits stands out. It signals a future that prioritizes sustainability over symbolism alone. What remains most striking is the absence of drama. This was not a moment marked by confrontation, but by maturity. The monarchy did not fracture. It adjusted. That distinction will shape how this period is remembered. As time moves forward, the significance of this confirmation will deepen. Future generations will look back and recognize it as the moment when clarity replaced ambiguity, when leadership chose responsibility over comfort. Meghan's future now unfolds independently. The monarchy's future moves forward with defined purpose. Both paths, though separate, are finally free from uncertainty. And in that freedom, difficult as it may be, lies the foundation for stability. History often turns not on loud declarations, but on quiet decisions made with resolve. This was one of them.